Hey guys, yet another video here on YouTube. So today I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts on the new Pixar movie Turning Red from the perspective of a Chinese cultural background and more or less share some cultural explanation behind the story setting, specifically the parent-children relationship in Chinese culture. Now if you didn't know, if you're new to this channel, I'm from Taiwan. Now I'm not here to talk about whether Taiwan is a part of China or not today. I've already made a video on it, so if you'd like to check it out, I'll leave a link in the description. But anyway, we do follow for the most part Chinese culture as well, which is why as I was watching the movie, I definitely feel like I can relate to a huge part of it because of my cultural background. At some points in the movie, it even feels like the story of Mei Ling is also a pretty accurate representation of my own story when I was a teenager as well. For example, she has a lot of trophies. I also have a lot of trophies. My mom also used to sign me up in all kinds of different competitions when I was a kid. And also in the scene where she was not able to go out with her friends to the karaoke because she just has so much to do. That also happened to me a lot. I remember when I was in middle school, I was really struggling to make friends, and when I was in high school, I was finally able to make some friends, but I really wasn't allowed to hang out with them that often after school because I just have so many classes to take after school. And if you didn't know, at least in Taiwan, it is very common to send your kids to different classes even after school so that they can study other skills or study for their exams. So basically the entire day is just studying and taking different classes. But anyway, it's definitely a terrible feeling to always feel left behind where your friends are hanging out. But also in this scene, Mei is claiming that she actually enjoyed doing all of these things, which from her friend's perspective, she is kind of brainwashed. I can totally relate to that. There was also a time where I was so used to oppressing my feeling and my opinion that I became very good at convincing myself that I actually enjoy doing these things that adults are asking me to do, because that kind of is the only way I know of to kind of escape the reality and also make myself feel a little bit better under this extremely high pressure lifestyle. So the relationship between parents and their children in Chinese culture is obviously a huge focus of this movie, and I'd say that it really has done a good job representing it. So first of all, I definitely like to take some time to explain this core value of the parents-children relationship in Chinese culture, which is this word or concept that literally appeared in the first scene of the movie and connects the entire storyline. It's pronounced as xiao, in case you're wondering. So in the movie, they gave a very simplified explanation to say that it's to honor your parents. It honestly feels more like to obey your parents and to sacrifice your well-being for your parents to me, but it definitely is considered a virtue in Chinese culture. There's really no direct translation of this word in English since it's a very specific concept in Chinese culture, but to give you a rough idea, I'd like to show you this book that is very well known and also what we actually use to teach kids in school. Most Taiwanese people my age have definitely also read different versions of this book when they were in elementary school or have heard of some stories in it from their parents or teachers. And it's basically just a series of stories where kids would go as far as to sacrifice their own life for their parents and, for example, sell themselves as a slave to get money to bury their parents. In this one story, the main character even decided to kill his own kids for his mom. And generally speaking, children were encouraged to look up to these kids from the stories and set them as their role models. And I specifically remember these stories where when I was in elementary school, so many teachers would always tell. It's a story about this kid who would always get beaten up by his mom, but he never complained. But one day as his mom was beating him as usual, he started to cry, and the mom asked him why,